What's up, guys? It's your boy Patrick, aka Addicted to Combat here. Another week of fights. This time it's UFC Vegas 53, Rob Font versus Marlon Vera. Very fun, exciting main event, and I'm more excited for the fact this week that we've got 12 fights so far, and I think 9 or 10 of them currently are minus 200 favorites or less on the money lines. So a week where we get to return to closely contested UFC fights the way it should be, the way that we expect it. Not the highest name value, but a good spot to make some money. Don't get me wrong, again, it's going to be, closely contested fights in a lot of these, arguments on both sides, some sketchy, untrustworthy fighters on a few of these spots. But at least if we're going to make an educated guess, we don't have to put out that much money on the money line, to wager a bet there. And there are some underdogs I like this week too. So a good spot as a fan to watch some exciting close fights. As a sports bettor or a degenerate gambler, it's a good spot to make some change as well. So without further ado, let's get into it. Okay, I'll make this one quick since it was supposed to happen last week, but Chase Sherman got I got a little sick, and I think he got scared when he saw Romanov on the scales. But anyways, this is Alexander Romanov taking on Chase Sherman. Chase Sherman's still on short notice, so we can't give him too much flack for not showing up last week. That was like 5 days notice. So now we're at almost 2 weeks notice. So still short notice for a guy. And Alexander Romanov, 15-0, 14 finishes. Chase Sherman, 15-9 professionally. Like I mentioned last week, 8 losses out of those 9 have been in the UFC. Only 3 of his 15 wins have been in the UFC. So it's no wonder he got cut. He's really not on the level, doesn't have a big gas tank. The durability is lacking. And that has made Alexander Romanov, I think, the biggest favorite in UFC history, I want to say, in a bout, which is minus 2,500 on Bovada Sportsbook. Chase Sherman plus 1,200. But a quick little reminder of our implied probability. Minus 2,500 would, still, minus 2,500 would be like a 96.2% implied probability. So if these guys fought 100 times at heavyweight, you're saying Alexander Romanov should win that 96 times, a little over 96 times out of 100. We talk about banana peel price tags. We're kind of at that point now where it's like, 4 out of those 100 times, what if Romanov just has he gashes out or twists his ankle, they clash heads, the ref doesn't see it's a clash of heads, he gets like a cut stoppage or something weird, can't continue. Weird stuff is happening with these big favorites in the UFC, so I wouldn't recommend adding Romanov to any of these giant parlays, any Hail Mary parlays, PRP things. I wouldn't add minus 2,500 Romanov. Or anything, any heavyweight that's over minus 1,000, I wouldn't add to any of your parlays. I certainly won't. I think you should do the opposite, really. If you're going to be one of those guys with the lottery, I do a lottery ticket every week where I put a fraction of a unit on every single pick that I think is, going to happen on the card. And, we hope for the best in that lottery ticket. It rarely hits. But why not do that and then make another one with Chase Sherman plus 1,200 on it, and that would be, you'd be like a millionaire. So I would recommend doing that instead of parlaying Romanov as a favorite, But I do think he wins the fight. I think he wins it fairly early. Even the time props are juiced under 1.5, minus 300. That's just crazy, but it probably will happen. Romanov looked in incredible shape on the scales last Friday, so, I think he comes in here, looks like a minus 2,500 favorite. It might be close on the feet for a second before Romanov, takes him down and chokes him out. So I still think this is going to be either a TKO, ground and pound stoppage, or, if Chase Sherman rolls to his back, then he might get his neck snatched up and choked out. So give me Romanov to win this fight inside the distance, round 1. Okay, here's what's actually opening up the card, I believe, is a flyweight bout between 2 guys making their debut, Taira and Carlos Candelario. So Carlos Candelario, we've seen in the UFC almost. We saw him on the Dana White Contender Series lose a very, very close decision. He arguably could have won that fight against Victor Altamirano in the last season of the Dana White Contender Series. We saw Victor Altamirano have a very close fight in his debut and drop that. So we can kind of see the level of competition that Carlos Candelario has faced. Also competed for the CES organization up in the East Coast. That's turned out some decent prospects as well, including the main event fighter, Rob Font. So decent organization. Can't say the same for Taira, young guy, 22 years old, undefeated 10-0 professional record over in Japan, with an 8-0 amateur record as well. So that's from when he was like 16, 17 years old. So he's been fighting for a while, young guy. Minus 250 favorite is Taira. Has never even had a fight in the UFC, or not in the UFC, but in the United States either. So this will be his first fight in the region, so that's going to be going against him a bit. I get the fact that he's a minus 250 favorite just because he's, got this giant undefeated streak going, and Carlos Candelario is coming off of a loss, but money is certainly coming in. I think these lines were a bit wider just a few days ago. Money's come in, people taking the underdog shot on Carlos Candelario, and I will be as well. Not personally from a betting perspective, but I will pick him to win this fight. Not a lot to go off of, but Carlos Candelario, like I said, better organization, more proven track record of opponents, 30 years old, the bigger man. A lot of the fights I saw Taira fight where they were smaller than him. He's still very, very hittable. Opportunistic submission guy, though. If he gets his opponent hurt or stunned, he wastes no time wrapping up, getting the back, grabbing their neck and choking them out. Very, very good that way. He can win that fight this way too, but I have less to go on. This will be the first time he's really fighting somebody much bigger than him. And I think he's got that like 20 to 22-year-old problem that they have when they're undefeated, where they really need to taste that piece of defeat before they go back and fix the holes in their game. So not a whole lot of good competition. Not a lot to be desired on the feet. I like what I saw out of Carlos Candelario. He's a pretty well-rounded guy. I think the more well-rounded, complete fighter here, and just a maturity difference at 30 years old. And most importantly, a plus 200 underdog. So give me Carlos Candelario, low confidence pick to make his UFC debut and get his first win. I think they have this fight lined at the over 2.5 rounds. If you want to take a look at those odds, I think there's a good chance that Carlos can finish this fight inside the distance. Like I said, I think he's the stronger man here. The footage I saw of Taira, very, very hittable. Doesn't look to have the most durability. If he gets the W2, it's probably inside the distance, at some sort of submission or something like that. So I think this fight could finish inside the distance if the prop was juicy enough for us. But either way, it's still flyweight, so we don't want to get too invested. I think Candelario does win this inside the distance, though. Okay, up next is a low-level fight between Gina Mazany and Shayna Young. This is at women's flyweight. Now, forgive me if I haven't done my due diligence on Shayna Young. I know she has fought in the UFC 2 times now, has gone 0-2 to Macy Chiasson, and most recently was Stephanie Egger. But I don't think she's fought at flyweight before. If she has, it was a while ago, sometime maybe in Invicta or something like that. But just looking at this now, I'm realizing this might be her first time at 125, which might add to my small, terrible argument that Gina Mazany should win this fight. She's a minus 160 favorite, is Gina Mazany, and plus 140 underdog price on Shayna Young. And the fact that Gina Mazany is only minus 160 over a woman that is 7-4 professionally, 0-2 in the UFC, just speaks to how unimpressive Gina Mazany is herself, in my opinion. Now, she has 8 UFC fights, this Gina Mazany. She's 3-5 in those fights. So I have to favor her resume, so to speak, because she does have 3 UFC wins, 3 more UFC wins than Shayna Young. But man, both of these women get finished a lot. They do get finishes themselves here and there. You'll have some round 3 finishes for Mazany, like the one over Ostovich, I believe it was. Shayna Young and Invicta has had some finishes too. But man, I just can't get some of these finishes. Like the most recent one, Shayna Young got finished by Stephanie Egger, ground and pound, and one of the elbows just kind of went into her eye, or one of the elbows cut her up, and she did not like it. So it almost looked like an early stoppage when you watch it the first time. But the ref kind of saw that Shayna Young just she broke. She stopped defending it. She got hit by one of those elbows from Egger, and kind of just you could see her kind of quit, or something went wrong. So the ref stopped in. I think it was Mark Smith, if memory serves me right. But Anyways, Gina Mazany, kind of the same thing. I can't help but get that horrible first round standing TKO out of my mind from Julia Avila, from Priscilla Cachoeira. I mean, that one, Priscilla Cachoeira is kind of a beast in her own way. She is hittable, but she's kind of a monster. But the one from Julia Avila, my God, I mean, she got hit like by a knee that she didn't like, and then she got just folded and quit against the cage. I mean, there's just a lot of quit in both of these women. If you were to look at if there's a juiced up women's flyweight fight doesn't go to decision, I wonder if the bookies are privy to the fact that this might end inside the distance. Whoever folds, whoever breaks first, this could end inside the distance. I think Gina Mazany, just based off of her resume, should do a better job here. But Shayna Young is bigger, probably should be more physically strong by the looks of her. But I think Gina Mazany has been there, done that a little bit more in the UFC, and she'll send Shayna Young packing with her third straight UFC loss and probably the last time we'll see her. So give me Gina Mazany to win this fight. Up next, the lightweight bout between Natan Levy and Mike Breeden. Both of these guys have had a fight apiece in the UFC, a fight apiece in the Dana White Contender Series, I believe in the 2020 season for both of these guys too. So some similarities here. Both are 0-1 in the UFC. I think both came in on short notice too. Definitely Mike Breeden came in on very short notice against Alex Hernandez. We all know the story there. I think it was early October. Comes in on short notice. Everybody expects Hernandez to come in, get his classic round one performance, a little bounce back spot. He does just that, as a -600, -700 favorite. Hernandez knocks him out. I can't help but respect Mike Breeden's, he had some balls stepping forward, center of the octagon, threw some heat Hernandez's way, but eventually got beat down against the cage. Violent combinations, mouthpiece knocked out, overhand right finish. And, Natan Levy doesn't have too bad of an overhand right himself. I've seen him throw that against opponents against the cage. Unorthodox striker at times is Natan Levy, but very violent combinations he throws. And he, for being kind of a lower level or lesser experienced guy for Natan Levy, he has an odd smooth transition from his striking effectiveness to the submission game. He'll go from effective striking into the cage, get the easy takedown when his opponents are distracted or hurt, and get some pretty good submissions. So both of these guys have power. Both of these guys have finishing ability later in the fights, both Mike Breeden and Natan Levy. Natan Levy's got a very slick submission game, though, a variety of submissions. You even saw in his Contender Series fight in round 3, he got an arm triangle, slept his opponent from mount. He didn't even have to transition to the opposite side where he could really turn the corner and torque the arm triangle. He got it from mount, which is pretty impressive. Like I said, his opponent didn't even tap. He slept, I believe. So that's not a good matchup for Mike Breeden, who I've seen Mike Breeden on the regional scene just recently in the past year have trouble against submission threats of guys that I don't even think are on the level of Natan Levy. So -200 favorite for Natan Levy. I don't think that's a bad price. I think that's pretty good. It's hard to pay more than that price because, like I said, both guys are coming off of a loss. Natan Levy coming off of a decent loss in hindsight to Rafa Garcia. Rafa Garcia is very, very skilled, we've seen. So not too much of a shame there, especially for the lack of experience that Natan Levy had coming in. So like I said, -200. I think there's still some value on him just because this is a bad stylistic matchup, in my opinion, for Mike Breeden. I would look for Natan Levy by submission if I had to guess an outcome for this fight, but he could very well win a decision here as well. But if there's a juiced up prop for Natan Levy by submission, I would take a look at that. So give me Natan Levy to win this fight. Okay, up next is a fight I'm looking forward to at 170 pounds. Welterweight fight between Johan Lainesse, the White Lion, and Gabe Gifted Green. So both guys fairly new. Johan Lainesse has only had one Dana White Contender Series fight, which he won. And now this will be his first fight in the UFC. Gabe Green has had a couple fights in the UFC already, 1-1. He had an awesome fight with Daniel Rodriguez. Although he lost every round, he did show a good account of himself, landing upwards of 120 significant strikes on Daniel Rodriguez, who's a force in the division, fringe top 15 guy in the division. So pretty good debut there, even in defeat. He went on to beat I think early last year he beat Philip Rowe, who has looked pretty good after that as well. So, looked very good in the striking, sat him down a couple times later in the fight and, won that fight pretty clearly. So he should have some confidence coming in after his first UFC win, but that's going to be met with the confidence of the White Lion from Canada, Johan Lainesse, who is 8-0, the former LFA champion, and that's the first time I bet on him as an underdog, a big underdog against Evan Cutts in the LFA, and he went in there and got it done pretty easily. So, powerful striker, big guy, oddly big for 170, oddly powerful for 170, and only 28 years old, so still time to improve, just like Gabe Green, also 28 years old. Then after that, bet that I made on him as an underdog, I went in and, parlayed that success with his fight against Justin Burlinson, where he was another big underdog in the Dana White Contender Series. So I bet on him there. Easy bet, first round knockout. So he's a very good counter striker. When his opponents pressure forward, he's good at, he might have to take one to land a more powerful one, but he's a powerful guy at 170. Very good counters. Not really punches straight down the middle, winging shots, big strong hooks. When he misses powerfully, but when he lands powerfully. But those misses definitely aid in his cardio. Not looking great later in fights if he cannot get those early knockouts in round 1 or early round 2. He does fight through the fatigue. You got to give him credit. He fights through the fatigue. He has won decisions before, even when he looks very, very tired. He's going to have the 3-inch height and reach advantage in this fight, be the bigger, more powerful man. I do understand Gabe Green is probably the more well-rounded mixed martial artist, and I do worry about Johan Lainesse if he can't get the early finish. But I think he will get the early finish. I'm going to ride with him again. As long as you give me underdog money on Johan Lainesse, he's still plus 130, 135, 125. It's kind of fluctuating, but around that range. And Gabe Green is like minus 160 or so favorite right now. So as long as you're giving me plus money on Johan Lainesse, I think he can get this done. I think the more that Gabe Green opens up with the striking, I think that's more opportunity for Johan Lainesse to counter powerfully. And we've seen Gabe Green put out before, although it's been a long time. Gabe Green's best bet is to try to ground this fight. Or play at range and play safe, not getting into any sort of dirty phone booth type of fight with Johan Lainesse. But I think Johan Lainesse will find that knockout blow one more time for us. There's a time I'm going to fade Johan Lainesse, and the time is not now. I'm going to ride with him as an underdog to get this fight. And I would look for that round 1 or just the knockout prop if that's dropped and if that's juicy. But either way, I'm not going to get too greedy about plus money on my boy Johan Lainesse to get this victory. Okay, up next, another men's flyweight bout between Francisco Figueiredo and Daniel da Silva. Daniel da Silva, both of these guys are pretty new to the UFC, but Daniel da Silva last made his debut in October of last year, I believe it was, against Jeff Molina. Might have been short notice, but we knew from the small amount of information on the regional scene, a few of the fights we could watch in Daniel da Silva's career that he was kind of a first-rounder bust type of guy at flyweight, which is sort of rare. But we had just seen Jeff Molina, on the other hand, go out there and have a 3-round, high-volume, high-paced war against Arichi Lang in his debut. So we kind of knew that Jeff Molina was the side. We thought that if he didn't, if he could display that same durability he showed against Arichi Lang, against Daniel da Silva, that he could win an extended fight. That's exactly how it played out. Daniel da Silva did not look that bad in round 1, but in round 2, he, succumbed to the pressure of Jeff Molina, got finished. So kind of a first-rounder bust type of guy based on that performance, based on his, previous resume would state. But Francisco Figueiredo, man, they try to do this guy a couple favors, like give him Malcolm Gordon. He makes bad IQ mistakes, goes for submissions he shouldn't in that fight. He's just so low volume. He won his only UFC win based off of, a ton of control time, and good on him. But his even his fights, like in Jungle Fight and stuff that I've watched on the regional scene before he got in the UFC, very close, sketchy fights. The guy's just going to be probably the less athletic guy. He's the older guy. I think there's a lot going for Daniel da Silva, regardless of him being a first-rounder bust guy so far. I think he definitely can show a lot more than Francisco can in this fight. On the feet especially, he'll be, the more pressure fighter, the higher paced, higher volume fighter. If not in rounds 1, but also in round 2, I don't see Daniel Da Silva gassing out. I don't see him getting a large finish threat. But if he does gas out and Francisco can backpack him or, control him on the ground for rounds 2 and 3 and he loses, so be it. This is not a very high confidence pick. There's not a lot to go off of. But, I think Da Silva should win this fight. I think he can win it within 1 round like his win condition usually is. And I'm basing that off of just his age, his reach advantage and size advantage, his, just the clear athleticism difference. And it's only a minus 120 price tag on Daniel Da Silva. Very closely lined fight. Plus 100 on Francisco Figueiredo. So, very coin toss fight. Usually in coin toss fights, you're going to want to pick the underdog, pick the guy who's been 3 rounds before, but there's just not a lot to like about Francisco Figueiredo. So I like what I've seen from Daniel Da Silva a little bit more, and give me Da Silva to win by round 1 finish. Up next at 185 is Krzysztof Jotko taking on GM3 Gerald Meerschaert, everybody's favorite underdog. And it's for a reason, man. I see a lot of Gerald Meerschaert love, which is awesome to see. Both big middleweights here. 6'1", 77-inch reach for both southpaws in this matchup. I think Gerald Meerschaert might be just the physically bigger guy, technically, even, aside from those measurements. But we'll see at weigh-ins. But he usually is a very big guy at middleweight. So, like I said, everybody's favorite underdog for a reason. He was an underdog against Makhmud Muradov, huge underdog, comes through. Was a big underdog against Bartosz Fabinski, comes through. Duran Win comes through. Even an underdog back against like Eric Anders, and he should have won that fight. It was a split decision that I think should have gone Meerschaert's way, but consistently coming through as an underdog, and he's an underdog again, plus 150 against minus 170 favorite Krzysztof Jotko. So both guys have been in the UFC for a while. I think GM3 has been around there since like 2017, late 2016, something like that. Krzysztof Jotko maybe a little bit longer, but Gerald Meerschaert with the more experienced professional MMA career. And, if you want to look at these finish stats, pretty crazy for Gerald Meerschaert. He's the submission leader in the middleweight division with 8. 26 of his 34 wins have come by submission, and 43 out of his 48 professional fights in his life have ended inside the distance, both wins and losses. So, you compare and contrast that with Krzysztof Jotko, who's more of a decision fighter, right? If it goes to the decision, he's 16-2 in decisions as a professional. Only 10 of his 28 fights have ended inside the distance. So, one guy is going to decision a lot. If it goes to decision by the numbers, Krzysztof Jotko should be able to grind out a boring, at-range kickboxing bout, grind against the cage type of bout. I wouldn't want to play with Gerald Meerschaert on the ground too much at all. If I was Krzysztof Jotko, I'd want to keep this at range and hope that I can get the better of the striking. But Gerald Meerschaert's no slouch with the kickboxing either. He's had body kick TKOs. And Krzysztof Jotko's been finished on the feet as well, by, I think, like Uriah Hall, and who is it? Brad Tavares might have finished him as well. Let me double check that. I know he's been finished by a couple of guys. I think those were the names. Yep, Brad Tavares, Uriah Hall. And that wasn't too long ago, a few years ago. So those were his last finish losses. Other than that, Sean Strickland, in a decision bout more recently. But Gerald Meerschaert on a 3-fight win streak here, all by submission. He's dangerous by submission at all parts of the fight. You can look at the evidence in his last 3 fights. One was first-round submission, 2 against Makhmud Muradov, second-round submission, where he was eating him up on the feet as well. And last but not least was against Dustin Stoltzfus, where he won in the 3rd round. Kind of a comeback submission there, but, he wins it. He's dangerous at all parts of the fight. Usually comes through as an underdog, and I like him as an underdog in this fight. So if I'm getting plus money on GM3, I would take for it. I would take it. I'd even look for that submission prop if you find it out there. They're a little slow in the props this week, but Gerald Meerschaert by submission has got to be, just as likely as Krzysztof Jotko to win by decision here, right? So if you're getting plus money, plus 150 on decision, and I'm sorry, plus 150 on the money line for GM3, I like that. If you're getting more than that for, a submission prop, I don't mind that either. So give me GM3 to win this fight by submission. Like I said, I can see this if it gets extended and goes to decision. I do favor Krzysztof Jotko to make it a boring, grinding fight on the feet, staying safe, out of the ground game of Gerald Meerschaert. But like I said, Gerald Meerschaert also has good kickboxing too. So I'm just taking the plus money side of things, the guy who I think has a lot of avenues to win this fight, and the guy who's proven as an underdog. Give me GM3 to win. Okay, up next at featherweight is a UFC mainstay and Darren Elkins taking on Tristan Connelly. This is an interesting fight from a lot of different perspectives here. Darren Elkins, obviously in exciting fights nonstop. He's a fan favorite. He's been in the UFC forever, and I believe he had to have started at lightweight, right? Because he's been in the UFC, I think, longer than the featherweight division existed. I think he probably started around like 2010 or maybe late 2009, something like that. Let me double check this. I know he's been in the UFC for a long time, like back in those like UFC Live on Versus days. If you know, you know. Let's see here. Yeah, 2010. That's right. Okay, so March 2010. So he started his first 3 bouts were at lightweight. 2011 collapse of the WEC. Featherweight division comes along, and he's been in there ever since then. Ever since 2011, he's been fighting at featherweight. The guy is 37 years old now. He's got a collegiate wrestling background as well. 26-10 record. He went on a big losing streak for a while there. I think like a 4-fight losing streak. And bounced back, a couple of wins, including the one over Derek Minner. And he just had a scary loss against Cub Swanson. That's what is making me feel weird about this fight, because I think he should beat Tristan Connelly skill-wise in the grappling. At least dirty boxing and things like that, he should be a lot better. They're both the same size, a slight reach advantage to Darren Elkins. Darren Elkins, even of a couple years ago, I think would walk through Tristan Connelly, or at least, be able to use his weaponized cardio, his toughness, to grind out a decision that way, maybe even get some sort of a ground and pound or submission stoppage. Even though that's Tristan Connelly's game, I think Darren Elkins was that good. But man, that loss to Cub Swanson, we're seeing the durability fade early on in the fight. Kind of the thing that he's known, to ward off in his bouts, is the durability fading early. And, that's he usually has to take some to give some in his fights. And that's why he's known as Darren the Damage Elkins. But man, that last loss made me think that at 37 years old, at 145, that those times are behind him. Sometimes you have a fighter that you can count on in certain spots to fight a certain way, and then the age and the damage just no pun intended, just catches up to them, and you have to jump off that money train, stop betting on that guy. And that's kind of where I'm at with Darren Elkins here. Prediction wise, I think he can win this fight, and I'll slightly pick him to win the fight. But betting wise, I think the best bet is to go on Tristan Connelly at plus money, because you're seeing a guy that, even though he's older too, he's at 36, he doesn't have the miles on him that Darren Elkins does. He certainly has the ability to, hang in there. We saw him against Pat Sabatini. He went 3 rounds and actually looked pretty good towards the end of the fight, against a good guy like Pat Sabatini. It was a decent fight in hindsight, knowing how good Pat Sabatini is. I think that guy is very underrated, and I like Pat Sabatini. So to see Tristan Connelly hang in there against him and actually put up a good competitive fight was impressive enough to me. So I'm going to pick Darren Elkins just based off of the huge experience edge, the fact that he has shown just a better array of skills in all the ways that I see Tristan Connelly trying to take this fight. But I'm more on the side right now. I see a lot of people going back and forth. Has Darren Elkins got one more in him? Has he got another, group of fights left in him? Was that just a fluke against Cub Swanson's power? I'm starting to think that was kind of like a decline in skill with age at this weight class. And I'm jumping off of betting on Darren Elkins. Even if he wins this fight, I don't think he's got many more. So from a betting perspective, I'd put your money on Tristan Connelly. This is a complete underdog or pass spot for me. But give me Darren Elkins to win this fight. Up next, a pretty close fight at 155. Men's lightweight, Jared Gordon taking on Grant Dawson. Grant Dawson, the slight favorite, actually a moderate favorite, minus 165, plus 145, the comeback on Jared Gordon. I always want to say Jared Gooden, but that's that welterweight guy that had some power in his hands but missed weight and got cut. So I always want to think about Jared Gooden. They look like complete opposites too. So Jared Gordon, underdog in this fight, 18-4. You know, 1 inch of height and a couple inches of reach. I think he's giving up in this fight. I think it's going to come down to the takedown defense of Jared Gordon and the grinding, relentless takedown pressure from Grant Dawson. Grant Dawson just needs one good takedown, one good dominant position, and I think he can just hang out there, make it a boring fight, maintain position the way he should have in his last fight against Ricky Glenn. And, you know, I don't think it'll require that much cardio from him, and I think he can just maintain that, maybe work to a dominant submission spot, or if not, just hold the control time. And I think that's going to be the way that he approaches this fight, and I think he can win off of that. If he was a bigger favorite here, you know, like a minus 200, I'd probably go towards Jared Gordon, the underdog side. I think Jared Gordon has a good chance of winning this fight as well, since I think Grant Dawson really does need to get that control time. You know, just wrestle F him, you know, as they say, into a decision win. I think that's Grant Dawson's only path to victory, really. You know, if he keeps on the feet, it's iffy. Striking isn't all, you know, that great compared to Jared Gordon. So, you know, more paths to victory for Jared Gordon, because I think Jared Gordon could, you know, if Grant Dawson leaves any holes in the control positions, I think Jared Gordon can, you know, reverse. You know, maybe look for a submission of his own, get on top, you know, or get back to his feet, you know. So I think it has to be kind of a perfect play for 2 rounds that Grant Dawson, you know, gets that takedown, gets a good control position, does not let him up, keeps that chest-to-chest pressure. But I think Grant Dawson gets it done, you know, at a only minus 165. Not that bad, but I think it's lined pretty correctly. So not leaving any extra value on Grant Dawson. I'm not excited to, you know, run out and bet this fight, but I think that's the likely path. You know, 17-1, he's beaten some good guys. You know, Jared Gordon has had some success as well, but he's also, you know, his durability has lacked and, you know, really failed him in a few spots. So not that he has to worry about that against Grant Dawson, but I think he will get grinded out here for at least 2 rounds. Controlled, frustrated, and Grant Dawson wins by decision is my prediction for this fight. Up next, the men's featherweight bout between Joanderson Brito coming back to fight Andre Fili. Second fight in the UFC for Joanderson Brito. He had that weird ending of his Contender Series fight. Got the UFC contract, fought Bill Algeo. I think that was like this, that was like January of this year. First loss he had in a while. He was on a big win streak, and that got stopped by Bill Algeo. Joanderson Brito, very, very explosive, you know, guy in the beginning of the fight, especially, you know, kind of a sprinter, moves forward quickly, you know, decent everywhere. He's got a good mix of explosive striking and submission. But Andre Fili is going to have a wealth of UFC experience over this guy. It's kind of odd that they're moving Brito along this quickly to fight Andre Fili. I know the Bill Algeo fight was competitive enough where that was a pretty good look for Joanderson Brito, but still, man, this is kind of odd that he's getting moved to Andre Fili, who's such a veteran of the division for so long. And Andre Fili, 31 years old, 5'11", 74-inch reach. So he's got a few more inches of height and reach over Joanderson Brito at 5'8", 27 years old is Joanderson Brito. I mean, look at this guy's picture, man. Look at him in the ring. Every now and then you see one of these international fighters in their 20s. Their 20s. I don't know what's going on, man. He looks like he's 40, but yeah, 27 years old, the younger man in this bout than Andre Fili. You look at these 2 pictures and you tell me who looks younger and who looks older. But anyways, maybe that's why they're moving Joanderson Brito along in his career a little bit faster. Maybe it's because they know he's aging out because he's like 40. But nonetheless, Andre Fili, like I said, very good record. 21-8, been in the UFC forever, fought a lot of people. you kind of know where his ceiling is, right? He beats some of those mid-tier guys. He's almost a gatekeeper in the division, so to speak. You're going to lose to the Bryce Mitchells. What are you going to do about that? Even Edson Barbosa lost to him. He just recently had that unfortunate fight against Daniel Pineda last year. Can't believe it's been that long. It seems so recent, but eye poke. Mess with the eye of Daniel Pineda. So even though Andre Fili looked good in that fight, looked pretty good, that fight just stopped. And credit to Daniel Pineda wanting to continue that fight, not quit. But the doctor saw he couldn't open up his eye, so they stopped it. Andre Fili, the much better technical striker, much better technical kickboxer. If he can keep this on the feet, he should be good to go in this fight, I think, and either win inside the distance, which he hasn't done in a while. But, he could win inside the distance or by decision is probably more likely. Joanderson Brito probably wants to take him out of his element, get him to the ground, work the submission game, or just catch him with something explosive early. But I think as this fight goes on and it gets out of round 1 and out of round 2, I think Andre Fili's safer and safer in this fight. And I think he cruises his way to at least a decision victory here. So give me Andre Fili. Minus 260 favorite, though, is a little bit much. I think that's largely due to his experience and the people he's fought. And the fact that he's coming off of, the beginning part of that fight was probably going to be a win for him. But, the minus 260 is probably largely to his physical stats and to his UFC experience. But I think Joanderson Brito is probably better than plus 210, which plus 210, that's like about, we're looking at somewhere in the realm of, why can't I do math right now? We're looking somewhere in the realm of we're counting that Andre Fili wins this fight, a high 60% chance of the time, I want to say the implied probability would be. Joanderson Brito probably has more than a 30% chance to win this fight. And, is there a little bit of value in him? Maybe, but the guy doesn't even have a UFC win yet. So, and even his Contender Series fight was, of course, he was winning the fight. I think it was like a low blow at the end. So even that was sketchy, but he's explosive, and he's Brazilian. So he's got a chance in this fight. I wouldn't hate anybody taking an underdog stab on him, but I do think Andre Fili should kickbox at range and stay safe, do enough damage, do enough for the judges to win all 3 rounds and win this fight. The co-main event of this fight night is Andrei Arlovski taking on Jake Collier, the prototype, versus the Pitbull. I don't really get his nickname, the prototype, for Jake Collier, but if somebody could explain in the comments what that's supposed to mean. I thought a prototype was like a rough draft or something that needs to be tweaked before it's finalized, which would actually make sense for how I feel about Jake Collier. So far at heavyweight, he's 2-2. Not very impressive, right? So his last victory was against Chase Sherman in January. Flattened him out, choked him out. Pretty easy night for him. Chase Sherman, not that good. His other win was against John Vellante by decision. Again, it's John Vellante towards the end of his career, especially. Not that great, not that impressive. In between those two was against Carlos Felipe. 3-round fight, split decision loss to Carlos Felipe. I don't even remember if that was a robbery or not. I think both guys were pretty bad in that fight. But if you're looking at all of the volume numbers from Jake Collier recently, that's kind of where they're coming from. I don't think it should be an issue against Arlovski, who recently has been so in range and out of range, effective striking. The guy knows how to win fights. He's a 43-year-old veteran of the game, former UFC heavyweight champion. He has not had a finish since Travis Brown. He knocked him out in round 1. A really fun fight back in 2015. I think that's Andrei Arlovski's last actual finish. So, but you're going to watch that fight between Jake Collier and Carlos Felipe and look at round 3 of that fight and tell me that Andrei Arlovski wouldn't turn up the heat on Jake Collier in that type of condition when he's gassed and has to take a deep breath in between every combination before his heart explodes. I really do think Inside the Distance should be live in this fight, but I'm not going to go against the pattern of the Pitbull, Andrei Arlovski. He's been winning fights a certain way, and that is by decision for his last handful. So I think he does enough. Minus 145 is a pretty generous price tag on him, honestly. I think he should be a much bigger favorite. It's just if he wasn't 43 years old, it's kind of like that Alexei Oleinik fight against Jared Vandera a few weeks ago, where it's like, I liked him to win that fight in a lot of ways, but he's just 44, almost 45 years old. How am I supposed to pick him? It's the same way with Andre Arlovski here. He's got the physical advantages you would want, right? He's light on his feet. He's going to be more in shape than Jake Collier. 6'3". The reach is about the same between these guys. Height's about the same. But Andre Arlovski, the true heavyweight, the guy who's been doing it forever, this guy couldn't make middleweight the way Jake Collier does, or did. So there's so much to like for Arlovski, and I think he should be like a minus 300 or more favorite if he wasn't 43 years old. So it's going to be very hard, just like Alexei Oleinik, just like Darren Elkins on this card. I'm going to pick him to win this fight, but it's very hard for me to get there betting-wise. Although I'm more confident than I think most people I've seen analyzing this fight are. A lot of people are thinking that because of the output of Jake Collier and all this stuff, that, and the age difference, that he should be a good bet as an underdog. I don't think that at all. I got nothing good to say about Jake Collier in regards to this fight. I think Andre Arlovski beats him everywhere and could finish him inside the distance. It's just the age that is really doing this. If you replace that 43 with like a 39, then I'd be all over this spot. I'd back up the truck and, load all of my money onto Andre Arlovski. But he is 43. You got to jump off of these guys at some point. But now is not the spot. I think he wins this fight against Jake Collier with ease in a 3-round decision, 30-27. Gets it done. Maybe even is close to finishing him at some point. But, eases off the brakes, stays out of harm's way, and wins this fight by a clear-cut decision. Okay, it's time for the main event of the evening, and it's a good one this week. Rob Font versus Marlon Chito Vera. Rob Font, minus 135, slight favorite. Marlon Vera, plus 115, slight underdog. That opened up a bit wider. You could see the soft opening was like plus 150 underdog price for Marlon Vera. That by the time it got to the popular books, it was around like plus 140, plus 135. So if you got in on that, I don't blame you at all. That's a very good number. It was better to get early on Marlon Vera, obviously, this week than later. Rob Font, it's better if you waited until now because the lines have tightened up a bit. And now you're getting a guy with a great resume like Rob Font, amazing elite skill set in the division, only minus 135. I love both of the price tags on these guys. It's a close fight. I'll go through what I think are the advantages, kind of how I think the fight's going to go. But I'm right out front, I don't hate anybody's argument for either of these guys. I think this is a very close fight, and I'm not leaning too strongly on either side. I'm going to mostly look by the numbers here and, common opponents and things that I've seen. So right off the bat, you're seeing significant strike advantage goes to Rob Font per minute. He's around a staggering like 5.6. Significant strikes landed per minute, only getting hit back like about 3.5, 3.5 or so times per minute. So outlanding his opponents, very, very good. And that's passes the eye test as well. If you watch his fights, amazing boxer. He makes himself so long with the really good double and triple jabs in range, hits a combo inside, exits with a combo. Even though he's an orthodox fighter, he'll switch stances occasionally, land that back foot forward, strike there in that switch stance for a bit, move around. And that could help him against the leg kicks of Marlon Vera. But Marlon Vera, I think what is going well for him is his size. And we're not going to, I haven't heard a whole lot of people talk about how much bigger I think Marlon Vera is going to be in this fight. Even though the tail of the tape shows an advantage for Rob Font, right? They're both 5'8". Rob Font with the 71-inch reach over the 70-inch reach of Marlon Vera. But any of the opponents that you watch that these two shared, namely Jose Aldo or, guys like that, even if you look at like Song Yadong, just look at guys that are, around the same size as Rob Font, and then look at how big Marlon Vera looks against them. If you look at Jose Aldo looked a little bit bigger than Rob Font, right? I mean, he's more muscular and things like that at 135. But, they're largely the same size. Marlon Vera is very, very wide individual. So I don't know how he makes this weight class. And I think he's going to be stronger against the cage. He's going to be stronger in any sort of grappling sequence. And I think his size is going to be one of the more underrated factors in this fight, if it gets dirty. So moving on to his significant strikes for Marlon Vera, we're looking at 4.08 significant strikes landed per minute, and he's absorbing 4.27. So he's actually getting hit a little bit more on average. And this is over a big sample size. You know, both of these guys have been in the game for a while. I think since like 2014, they both entered the UFC, which doesn't sound like that's, you know, that's kind of a recent date, 2014, you think about it, but that's actually like now we're going on 8 years in the game at this level. That's a long, long time for both of these guys. Marlon Chito Vera, only 29. So that's a bit of a youth advantage over the 34-year-old Rob Font. Rob Font, 19-5 record. Marlon Chito Vera, 18-7-1. So both guys have pretty good records. They've both faced pretty good opponents. I would give the resume advantage to Rob Font. He's faced more of the guys that have reached that elite level in the division and done very well against most of them. So, like I said, common opponents, both of these guys, you're going to have to watch that Jose Aldo fight and see how they did against one of the greatest, definitely one of the greatest featherweights of all time, but now a really good bantamweight in his, older age as well, in his mid to late 30s, as many miles as Jose Aldo has. He beat both of these guys. Rob Font just in December. Marlon Vera, they fought like a couple years ago, end of 2020 or so. So, Rob Font fought him for 5 rounds. Both of his last 2 fights have been 5-round fights, so there's an advantage there. And just the experience of being in the main event and competing high-level 5 rounds. One of the arguments that I see a lot of people making about Marlon Vera is, okay, yeah, he's the guy that you always live bet after round 1, right? Because he's going to drop round 1 and then accelerate in rounds 2 and 3, kind of like he did in the Davy Grant fight, and look like a machine and almost leaving you wanting more. Like, what if there's a round 4 or 5 for Marlon Vera? How good could he look in those? Could he have finished his opponent in those fights? And we'll get a chance to see that answered. I think he'll do very well. I don't really have, I don't have anything to point to and say that his cardio is going to die off in rounds 4 and 5, but the point is we haven't seen it yet, right? So I got to give that advantage to Rob Font as well. So I'm going to give the boxing advantage. I'm going to give just the technical striking advantage overall to Rob Font. I'm going to give the 5-round advantage, experience advantage to Rob Font, the resume advantage to Rob Font. But Marlon Vera has the kind of intangibles. If this fight gets ugly, I think he's better against the cage and the clinch. I think he'll be stronger in the ground. Like I said, he's bigger, and, the gas tank is up for debate, One thing that if this fight goes to decision, which I think it will, and the odds makers think that this fight will go the overs more than the unders as well, is Rob Font is 7-4 in decisions, and Marlon Chito Vera only 3-7 in decisions. So Rob Font, that's just going to be a product of his large striking volume. He's just on average, he's hitting those higher triple-digit numbers per fight than Marlon Chito Vera is. Another fight that I like to watch for this was the Song Yadong fight against Marlon Chito Vera, where Song Yadong hit a very good game plan that I think Rob Font can do even better, right? He'd shoot him up with the striking, the boxing at range, even up close, he'd shoot him up. He was able to kind of crowd the kicks of Marlon Vera, catch a lot of the kicks, catch a lot of the knees, counter off of them when Marlon was kind of off balance. And that's how he won the fight, Song Yadong. He really just outboxed him. Now, the moments that Marlon Vera had success in that fight was like I was just talking about. Against the cage, he was better in the clinch, stronger in the clinch. On the ground, he was able to get ground control time. But Song Yadong was even able to, at 22 years old when he fought him, he was able to wall walk against the cage and get back to his feet. He was able to catch kicks and knees against the clinch in the cage and reverse that position, put Marlon against the cage. And he ended up winning a very close competitive fight there, having more significant strikes landed in the entire fight. So that's kind of a path to victory way back when. I think that was like I can't remember when that was. I think that was early 2020 that fight had happened, right? So it's been a little bit, but Marlon Vera still largely fights the same. It wasn't a bad performance, but he got outclassed, and beat in a close fight. And I think Rob Font can copy the game plan of Song Yadong, honestly, in that. And I like that Rob Font just fought Jose Aldo in his last fight, because that's going to give him something to focus on. Jose Aldo exposed some of the defensive liabilities of Rob Font. He exposed, some of the sloppy groundwork of Rob Font. When Rob Font was kind of tired or hurt at the end of a round, he might go for a single leg sloppily, get reversed on the ground, end up on bottom, so he can fix some things like that. And I think this will be a step down in competition, obviously, from Jose Aldo, who's, just one of the most elite fighters of all time. So I think that'll give Rob Font something to focus on. Even though he's not riding in here with the win momentum, the 2-fight win streak that Marlon Vera is, it's a very close fight, but I think that if he can stay off of the cage, Rob Font, if he can stay at range, not let this get dirty, counter off of the kicks of Marlon Vera, I think he could win this fight with the boxing and win at least 3 out of the 5 rounds. And just pure striking volume, start damaging the face of Marlon Vera the same way they damaged the face of Jose Aldo. And I like his ability to win a decision here. I don't see him, even though he does have fight-ending power in some cases, I see him winning a decision in this fight, and I'm somebody who actually went for Rob Font by decision against Cody Garbrandt, which is a sneaky look, but that was like plus 375, plus 400 last summer when that happened because they thought Cody Garbrandt was, such a glass chin that he wasn't going to last against Rob Font. But Rob Font just did what he did, just, nullified the wrestling, used his boxing, and won the fight there. So I think he can do the same thing against Marlon Vera. I'm curious to see what the Rob Font by decision prop would be. Just in some of the books I don't have access to, I see on best fight odds, it's around like plus 170 range. In that case, if it's that low, I'd probably rather just take Rob Font on the money line. Why risk it? There's a lot of weird things happening in mixed martial arts these days. So when I get a nice line like this at minus 135, I'm not going to get too greedy about a close to even money to pick, roundabout. But I can see Marlon Vera winning this fight, and anybody who takes like a rounds 4 or 5 or decision for Marlon Vera, I think he could win that as well. We saw Rob Font sort of his durability fade against Jose Aldo. Marlon Vera could definitely, if he fights the dirty fight, gets in close, muscles him against the cage, I think the physicality could work for Marlon Vera. Rob Font will have to fight a perfect fight. I just think Rob Font is way better at what he does than Marlon Vera is at any one thing. So Marlon Vera certainly has the tools to win this fight, but I think Rob Font is so much better. If he can keep this fight in his realm, he can really outclass Marlon Vera. So slight lean for Rob Font. I like him to win. I like him by decision, but I don't hate any argument in this fight. I'm not dying on this hill. I think both guys are live to win this fight. I just think it's more often than not that Rob Font will win the decision, and I do like the overs in this fight. Okay, there we have it. Full card breakdown and predictions for UFC Vegas 53, Font versus Vera. Had a lot to get into on this card, a lot of good arguments on both sides. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts in the comments. What are your guys' best bets for this week, your most confident picks and whatnot? If you agree, disagree with me, I always want to hear it in the comments. Usually got some good conversations going. So I'll be back in a day or two with the best bets and props for this week. I will try to do that before the weigh-ins this time, just so that there's a little extra time to digest the information and choose our most confident picks for the weekend. So good luck in all your betting action. I will see you next time.